Okay. Hi, everyone. This is Team Colorado State University, and we're addressing local community involvement on mitigation and response for climate-induced natural disasters in Mozambique. We're building resilience in Mozambique by creating a new program that distributes resiliency kits. Mozambique is ranked as one of the most vulnerable countries to disaster risk and climate change in Africa due to its location and long coastline. Flooding, heat waves, cyclones, and drought are increasing in the frequency and intensity. In the last 35 years alone, there have been at least 75 natural disasters that have plagued the country, including Cyclone Idai of 2019, which was the most destructive tropical cyclone ever recorded in the Southern Hemisphere. There are already over 700,000 Mozambicans who are displaced from their home communities and living elsewhere in the country due to both conflict and natural disasters. Mozambique's sensitivity to extreme weather events is only expected to grow in the coming years, which negatively impacts and disrupts the lives of many and could displace many, many more people. Because of this, our team asked the question, how can we build community resilience for displaced people in Mozambique?
To answer this question, we conducted some secondary research by reading some research articles from the UN and other global issues throughout our research. We also confirmed that there's a need for development for an evacuation and food program. In addition to the secondary research, we conducted interviews with some academic experts from Mozambique who had some direct experience with the aftermath of Cyclone Idai. A common theme that we heard was that people were really unable to access food in the days, weeks, and months after natural disasters. And we learned that the government had a goal to assist with food storage during disasters, and they purchased hermetically sealed food bags for the families in disaster target areas.
Because we learned that displaced communities want to return and rebuild, our solution combines the development and distribution of resiliency kits. Our proposal focuses on the pre and post disaster response with a zoom in on food insecurity and includes local communities in the decision-making process during each step of the program. Our solution proposal will engage the local community and grassroots organizations in the development of the resiliency kits by conducting workshops within each region using design thinking processes in order to incorporate both creativity and human-centered solutions. So the resiliency kits include crop seeds, evacuation manuals, hermetically sealed bags, and other items needed, which are going to be decided by each unique community. Each item inside the resiliency kit is designed to create its own supply chain, which is going to incentivize the economic development of the local communities as they learn and build their own resiliency solutions. As you can see in the chart, each item inside the kit creates employment for local companies and farmers. So let's zoom in more on the logistics of the resiliency kits. We begin by including hermetically sealed food bags in the resiliency kits. These bags are used to store food and seeds during the disaster. This will enable the impacted communities to better prepare on facing food insecurity on a post-disaster scenario, and families will have access to food for the days and weeks after the disaster has hit. Evacuation manuals are also included in the kits. They will be developed by the community during the workshops with a major focus on how and what will work for each unique community. Crop seeds are included in the kits because they're among the most needed component during the post-disaster phase. The seeds are needed in order to start the rebuilding process. After people have been forcibly displaced, they look for ways to get back to their own homes, farms, and to their normal life in general. And finally, we leave space in our kits for the development of other ideas from communities being served. Community needs in one part of Mozambique are very different than community needs in another part of the country. Because of these regional differences, we are empowering each community to decide what other items they feel are important to be included. So after the community workshops have been completed, the seed varieties decided, evacuation manuals created, and other community items have been decided upon, we will then work to source, assemble, and distribute the resiliency kit. The Mozambican government is already creating a program to purchase hermetically sealed bags, and so we will partner with the government in order to include the bags in our resiliency kits. The entire product assembly is going to be sourced and produced locally. We will also be partnering with NGOs for the transportation of the resiliency kits, since the NGOs in Mozambique already have established aid distribution channels.
Here is the timeline for the Resiliency Kit project. We are bringing the community in from the start in order to make the project their own. The first few years will be guided by NGOs and government entities. After year 3, though, the communities and grassroots organizations will take the project on themselves without any support from NGOs or the government. They will be able to save their seeds in the hermetically sealed bags and have a consistent process of planning for the spring disaster season each fall by storing their food and their seeds away and planning for evacuations themselves. By creating a system in which NGOs and the government steps back after just a few years of the program, communities are empowered to take control of the project, making resiliency kits a sustainable program. Here's the breakdown for how much our project will realistically cost. As you can see, each kit is only a little over $1 US. Our solution is extremely cost effective and has the potential to save millions of lives. The $1.12 kit includes material sourcing, labor assembling the kits, and transportation and distribution. The seeds will be purchased from Mozambican farmers, and the other items will also be sourced from Mozambican companies in order to incentivize the whole supply chain and to provide more jobs and wages for people in the country. In 2020, Mozambique's population was 31.26 million people. Our goal is to reach 19 million people, or about 60% of the population in Mozambique by year 5 of this project. The cost of the kits will be $21.28 million US by the time communities completely take over the program in 2026. So we've already identified grants to fund our program, starting with a $500,000 grant from the Japan World Bank program for mainstreaming disaster risk and management in developing countries. And this grant is made to only be used in Mozambique, and they want it used by 2023. So we plan on applying for this one to use for our program. After receiving that initial funding, we will be combining our efforts with funding from the Mozambique government, USAID, the UN, and specifically, we also did identify another larger grant from Global Partnerships that is offering $20 million US to be used for emergency disaster education and strategies, specifically and only in Mozambique, and it must be used by 2026.
So what makes our Resiliency Kit program different than other approaches? Our approach is going to be a bottom-up approach because it is important that the community is involved from the early stages and throughout the entire process. So this program will involve grassroots and community leaders throughout the process and up until the point to where they can facilitate the program on their own. Our end goal is to fill the communication gap that is so often created by the community and the institutions in charge due to the top-down approaches used to tackle the disaster and community behavior. Climate change-induced disasters cannot be avoided. However, with these community resiliency kits, people will be more empowered to return to their homes and start rebuilding their lives.
Our team members are from Zambia, Kosovo, and the United States. Each of us has spent extensive time living and working in other cultures, and we are coming at this problem with various lenses. I'm Julia, team leader, and I have experience from Zambia, Germany, and US. I am currently focusing on community-based approaches to disaster management in Southeast Africa in my research. Lorinda is Albanian from the Republic of Kosovo. She's a Fulbright scholar, a true zero waste advisor, and has experience in agriculture and food systems. Tessa is an American from Utah. She's a United States returned Peace Corps volunteer after serving 2 years in Myanmar. Emily is an American from Kansas. She has nonprofit strategy experience and is also a United States returned Peace Corps volunteer after serving 2 years in Jamaica. Lorinda, Tessa, and Emily are focusing in social entrepreneurship with specialization in humanitarian aid logistics. Our resiliency kit solution is both sustainable and human-centered. We believe that resiliency kits can eventually be a scalable solution that is expanded globally, beginning with other high-risk disaster countries such as Indonesia, Central American countries, or South Pacific islands. Because we're using community input to tailor each kit to unique community needs, our program can become a global initiative in the future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Team Colorado State University. What a wonderful presentation. I'm now going to open the floor to the judges for 15-minute Q&A. If we run over, luckily there's no one after you this morning and / afternoon. So I will leave it to the judges.
Thank you so much. I'm very intrigued by a lot of the community-based approaches that you're having here, and also that you're using the whole idea of kitting. What I'm a bit wondering about, because it didn't quite maybe become apparent in your documents, is like, when would you distribute these kits, and how would you make sure that people that the kits themselves will not be destroyed in the next cyclone, and that people would be taking them with them and so forth?
So one piece of our kit is that hermetically sealed bag. And the reason that bag is so important is because that is where you can store your food and your seeds and any other items that you want to last through those storms, which is what we found during our interview process. A lot of the people that we talked to said that the government is already really interested in that hermetically sealed bag. So our piece in that would be essentially partnering with NGOs and grassroots organizations to distribute those bags within our kit, since the government is already interested in spending money on those bags to pass them out. And we will be kind of conducting those workshops initially with targeted communities, and then kind of coming back each fall to pass out the kits and to prepare for the spring storm season.
Also, if I, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Also, if I can just add a little bit to Emily's answer, we also are going to focus on already established routes by the non-for-profits operating in the rural areas of Mozambique, which are mostly impacted. We are not going to try to discover new routes or new ways on how to, because they already exist.
And have you guys already addressed the issue of where you're going to store everything?
Okay, so that's a great question. So while we're going through the interview process with the local community and local experts in Mozambique that are already trying to treating the subject, we are currently we're focused on developing a system of how we're going to design the kits. So we do hopefully believe that during the process of designing the kit, since we want to have the community involved from the get-go to the through the entire process of developing the kits, we think that is going to come up from the community themselves, because they know the real experience of what goes on and what do they experience during the natural disasters.
And if I can add on to Florinda's comment, during the interviews too, we did discover that the government is looking at different ways to bury food and seeds and then to come back after the disaster is over and dig that stuff up. And they're just looking for different ways to store some stuff underground. But like Florinda said, we clearly each community will look a little bit different.
Thank you for that. Thank you for an interesting presentation overall. So my follow-up question was one that you just addressed, like, so what's the plan with the food and seeds? Are they evacuating with them? Are they leaving them somewhere? And how can you be sure that they'll be safe? Don't know if digging them underground necessarily helps if the flooding is serious, but I will be interested to know how you ensure that people are not taking too much, because it also increases their risk. But at the same time, you can secure that interest that when they come back, they have something to come back to. So I'll pass on this round. I suppose it's a bit of a comment in case other people have specific questions.
Maybe let me jump in. First of all, congratulations on securing funding already. I was aware of the World Bank Japan program for mainstreaming disaster risk management, but I didn't know that they were willing to provide grants that early into the conception stage. But well done. Now I'm curious about the selection of the seeds, and so obviously the question is, I would presume that you're talking about seeds which would allow them to address the loss of crops because of indeed flooding and so on. But I wonder whether this is something which other disaster relief organizations might already have done, and whether you would have checked with the likes of UNHCR, UNICEF, and so on, so that you don't reinvent the wheel, but you maybe address the gaps in some of the things they might be doing. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about the work you've done to look at what others have been doing.
So based on the research that we've been doing and speaking with the experts from the universities in Mozambique, they did let us know that a lot of the seeds, such as I think they're called the black-eyed peas in America, those are the seeds that are lacking the most. And so far from what they told us, there's not really that provision of them having those seeds from these other organizations. They do provide them with maybe food supplies from time to time, but otherwise these seeds that they can actually plant, which they grow the most in Mozambique, are not being provided currently from the research that we've done.
I know we've talked a bit and raised questions about the sealed food bags and how those would be distributed and timing. Those certainly were some of my questions as well. Can you speak a little bit further about the evacuation manuals and the information and the resources that you'll be providing through that? Because I think that's certainly an important component as well.
So that's a great question. That's something that we came as a topic while we were doing our interviews. So according to our research, the government has information alarming people, notifying them that a cyclone is going to happen or a natural disaster is going to happen. But they saw it happen multiple times that the communities were not taking it seriously. They didn't know if the previous cyclone was not that strong. They would think that they can survive this without having to evacuate. They can do it on their own. But then a bigger cyclone happens and it actually puts lots of damage and makes them evacuate, makes them forcibly displaced. So what we were thinking during these interviews, that's how the idea of making the evacuation manuals and putting a sustainable system with the community together so they can also figure it out by themselves what would work for them, instead of just that's why we were treating this bottom-up approach, not the top-down, because they're always being told what to do, and it does not work because communities are very unique, very different. They live in different areas. So that's why the evacuation model we thought is going to be best designed by the community themselves.
Noni, I don't know if that helped to answer your question in the chat, but I don't know if you want to speak any more to that.
I think it was addressed until the last comment, which is, okay, so it looks like a huge level of responsibility that is being transferred to the communities. And evacuations are already quite complex. So if you will have these literacy issues, then you're giving them the responsibility to plan their evacuations. How do you make it work? So I can appreciate the need for them to have the power to make the decisions. How do you ensure that they are informed enough to make the best possible decisions for their given situations?
I think that's a wonderful kind of follow-up question to expand on. Like Lirinda was explaining, we do want to keep the power in the community so that they can say, this is how we are going to evacuate. But within the first 3 years of the program, they're going to be supported by NGOs and government entities to really be there to facilitate and to help them structure what those plans look like, so that they can then, those last few years of the plan, when they take it over completely by themselves, communities will have that foundation from the experts already, who will have been planning it with them. So we're not saying like, plan your own, evacuation and good luck. We're working with them to create something that makes sense for each community and might look a little bit different for each community, with the support of the NGOs that are already working within the scope of disaster response.
Can I ask Emily?
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, just follow up, Emily, and then I come after you.
No, so sorry, Gyong-Lee. Do you already have a list and a map of those grassroots organizations and NGOs? Is it something which remains to be pulled together?
My understanding is that we don't have a map quite yet, but I think as we further the development of this project, that we will develop something like that so that it can be easily accessed and repeated in other areas with the kind of a framework on how that has been working in the past.
Thank you for that. I think that there is an element there which is very important in terms of design thinking, and I think Noni was alluding to that. Languages issues, literacy issues, and it would be very nice to see in the next step of your project, effectively, how you're planning to tackle that across the country, where I think that there are many different groups and very different communities. Sorry, Gyong-Lee, back to you.
No, that's very, very relevant what you took up there. And I have another question, which also actually relates to one of your previous ones a bit. And that is how you take climate change here into account, because both the cyclones and the cyclone patterns, especially in that part of the world, have changed tremendously recently and are predicted to change tremendously. So community-based approaches are usually very, very good in tackling things where communities have had experience with, but there are no things that these communities probably have not had experiences with. And Cyclone Idai was an outlier, but it's not gonna be, according to any prediction models, be an outlier for much longer. So how do you take it into account, like, with in this whole approach of working with the community? That's one part of the question. The other question that I have has to do with the seeds as well. Like, how do you really then select any seeds that might take it into account as well for the future and might be kind of, better suited for the changing climate ahead?
I think that each year will have to be an iteration on the past year. We talked about design thinking techniques, and I think that as communities learn and as these cyclones and new patterns become more frequent, that the communities should be better prepared each year as it develops further, and especially as the program gains traction and becomes more of a standard across the coastline communities.
And also with, like you mentioned, the changing climates, as the communities continue to prepare, we'll probably look into adaptation measures, like, are these seeds still working? We'll obviously do monitoring and evaluation in the process to see what seeds we can put in our packages that are more adaptable to the climate change. So with our research as we go on in the project, this will be an ongoing process. We are not deciding that this is the one and only seed that we'll have. We have a seed in mind to start with, but as the project goes on, it will continue adapting to suit the varying climate change patterns.
I just have thank you for the additional information. I just have a question generally to help me appreciate the disruption that happens following these events, and if these communities tend to return to the same areas, or do they go somewhere else and kind of start anew?
The communities do tend to return to the areas that they came from, because most of the time that is where the land is fertile. So the government has been trying to get them to settle in other areas, but because adapting to these new areas can sometimes be difficult, and also the land might not be as arable, because I'm not sure if you know, but Mozambique is a predominantly agrarian society, so 70% are involved in agriculture. So for the most part, they go back because of the agricultural aspect. So our process is to kind of help them rebuild when they go back, not so that they're not exactly starting from scratch per se.
Can I please just make a quick comment? It's interesting that you're talking about the change and the adaptation, but then you also point to what people prefer. So I think one thing to be really aware of and always incorporating in your thinking is that cultural dynamic. You know, somebody wants to plant this crop because that's what they've been planting for generations. And so if that is the case, it may not be enough to say, look, we have scientific evidence that this is going to be better. And we see it, I mean, I'm from neighboring Zimbabwe, and the trend is that the seasons have been shifting forward a bit. So the rain is always late, the spring is always late, but they will say, for generations, we've been planting in this month, so we are going to plant, and every year they lose the crops. So it will be interesting how you can deal with that element that's behavioral or cultural or social, or whatever we may call it.
If I can just comment to that, perhaps, as I'm just thinking, perhaps in the workshops that we've alluded to, we could also include that just as to help them and kind of like educate them on how we can change the cultures.
If I may come back and build on what Noni said, I think that in risk management, of course, what do we say? We want to make sure that we take advantage of any crisis to foster change or desirable change. But of course, then the interesting part is you don't know ex ante what change would be desirable. So the process of engaging with each community and trying to find out what were the things that maybe some of them would have wanted to try, would have been able to shift. So anyway, just I really like Noni's comment and your approach. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Team Colorado State University. We don't want to keep you from any classes you may have to attend in the next few moments. Thank you to our judges and to Travis. I believe you have held on here. Thank you for being here as well. Congratulations again. I will be in touch regarding your mentorship session with one or two of our judges. I'll coordinate those with the judges, and we will have our determination for the top team on November 17th, which you will all be invited to accordingly. If you have any questions in the meantime, as always, shoot me a message, and I will be posting this video recording later today. So with that, I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. I will see the judges tomorrow, bright and early morning here on the East Coast, and looking forward to the last two presentations. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.